set of opportunities, and one of them says chat. If you touch on that, you'll see a chat box that will come up on the right-hand side of your screen. If you could all sort of enter your full name there and where you're from, it'll save us having to go around and have everybody individually put their information in. So if you could start to do that now, then we can go from there. Just to give you an idea of what's going to happen, Sally May has kindly agreed to lead the discussion. She has a presentation that she'll start in a minute. You can see Sally, I think, in one of the windows, if you've got it on your screen at the moment in gallery mode. I think we're now up to about 30 people on the event, which is great. And we've got people coming from all over the place. This is really interesting. Welcome, Jennifer. She's come from Buenos Aires in Argentina. And
wow.
Good old Lucy's here from Brighton. So we've got a real mix of people coming through. Thanks, everybody, for entering that information. If you want to have a look at the chat box to see who's here, that's great. If you're in gallery view, you can see lots of people at the moment. Some of them are videoing and some of them are just on audio. The other thing I need to tell you is that we are recording this. I'm hoping, as I said in my note, this is my first time, so I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to keep the recording, in which case we'll make it available hopefully afterwards to everybody if they want to watch it, or people weren't able to join us that want to see what happened. And just a warning about the chat box. I don't know how many of you are used to using the chat box, but you can use it to send private chats between yourself and other people that are currently on the call. However, do be aware that when I save the chat box, I'll be able to see all the private chats as well. So if you don't want me to see it, or you don't want other people to see what you wrote in the chat box, then it might be best not to put it in there at all. But you're welcome to use private chat if you just want to have a quick comment to somebody who's coming through. So I think it's time now for me to say, Sally, would you like to take over? And I think Sally's going to take the screen and start her presentation.
Yes, I am. Can you hear me? Is that a yes? You can hear me? I'm just checking I'm not muted. Right?
Yeah, no, you're definitely, I can definitely hear you, Sally. Don't worry.
That's good. Thank you. Okay. So there we go. Oh. Right, I just need to remove the chat box from the middle of my screen. There we go. So hello, everybody. So yes, I'm Sally May. I'm part of the Circular Brighton and Hove team. And thank you very much for joining us. We thought today, because we normally organise face-to-face meetings, we thought we would experiment with the Zoom and get everybody together. It's really lovely to see that there's people from further afield who are able to join us. I'll move on to the agenda. So this is what we're going to do. We'll try to make it interactive, and we'll build up to having a discussion a bit later on. So just to run through the agenda, we'll have a little look at just who we are and look at our definitions of circular economy and what we're trying to achieve. Then we're going to have a discussion about how might COVID-19 shape the circular economy. And so starting off with a snapshot of COVID-19, and then we'll refer to Katie Whelan's blog, which we shared in the invitation, because she came up with 3 principles, which is a really good start to the conversation. And then we would like to have a discussion about if we're aiming from moving from linear to circular in the context of what we're learning through the massive changes taking place as part of the COVID-19 response. What might we stop, start and continue? And then a little zoom down to the personal level as well. Because I'm a coach and I look at mindset shift and behavior as well. So I thought it'd be nice to wrap up with that. And then at the end, just any other thoughts. And we'll also ask you for your ideas on what kind of discussions we could have in the future on other topics. Okay, So, so we're Circular Brighton and Hove, and the other people, the other team members are, I'm going to forget now, Anna, David, Steve, John, myself and Jake, I think. So that's a whole range of people who, some are students and some are sustainability professionals, and we organise events mostly in Brighton and the area about circular economy. So it's cross-sector. We have people from business, from council, from the universities, all involved in our events. We sometimes do, as you can see on these pictures, we've got we did a litter pick of beach clean. We've done foraging with Claire Potter, who I think is on the call. She took us through a park and showed us all the interesting plants. We've also been to visit a local vineyard because we believe that we should be mixing business with pleasure. And yes, and we've had lectures. So for example, Ken Webster came to talk to us, and we were also able to meet Kate Rayworth. She did a guest lecture at the University of Sussex. So we have a strategy, which I just included in the middle. I won't go into the detail of that, but if you're interested, we can always do a session on that another time. So yeah, I noticed some of the people on the call. We've also got Lucy Hughes, I think, on the call. She's someone who has done a presentation with us. She's one of our great shining examples of circular economy entrepreneur locally, because she has invented an alternative to single-use plastic, which is food grade, made out of fish scales and seaweed. So welcome, Lucy, as well. So moving on, just a quick reminder, because I'm not sure what people's level of understanding is on the call. The basic principles of circular economy: design out waste and pollution, keep products and materials in use, and regenerate natural systems. So the goal is to move from the linear economy, which is take, make, dispose, and you end up with a waste basket full. And the aim is to emulate nature, where there is no concept of waste, and end up with an empty waste basket. So that's the basic approach to circular economy. Is everyone here okay? Because I can hear some background noise.
Yes, could we just ask everybody to mute? I'm checking, but I don't want to mute everyone, or I'll end up muting Sally as well, unfortunately.
Well, if you want, you could mute everyone, and I could unmute myself. But
Oh, we try that. See what happens. Okay, Sally, time to unmute yourself. Okay, you're unmuted. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so, and then if we begin with the end in mind, the overall goal is a safe and just space for humanity. So using Kate Rayworth's notion of the donut, where we should live on the green bit, which is we're respecting the environmental ceiling, and we are meeting the social foundation. So we're meeting everyone on Earth's requirements for food, water, and all the other things listed in the middle of the donut. So, and I think there are many different definitions of circular economy, and the way into it is definitely to look at eliminating waste. And one of the reasons I like circular economy is because it's a good way to talk to big businesses about sustainability, because you're getting them where they're interested in saving money, in innovating, in looking at scarce resources and how they can start to address problems in supply chain. So that's definitely the starting point, but for me it gets really interesting when you start looking at eliminating waste and inequality. So looking at Alexandre Lemille's work on regenerative societies, which he's based on Kate Rayworth. So yeah, just to acknowledge that there are different notions of this, and we are in quite unprecedented times where we're seeing a lot of change. So let's bear in mind that it's kind of open, and we could be we're going to need to sense and respond here and see which direction we're going in and see how we can direct things. So if we move on to so COVID-19 and how might it shape the circular economy. So just a quick snapshot, and the purpose of this slide is just to acknowledge that we really don't know how far it's going to go. At the moment, we've got numbers based on how many tests have been done. So obviously in places where they're not doing many tests, we don't have many numbers. We're conscious that we've probably got a very good health system compared to other places in the world. So this is a real reminder that we're all connected, and what's a problem in one part of the world is going to be a problem everywhere. So we've seen an interesting letter here from the Club of Rome, which is an international think tank. Kate Raworth is one of the members, and they have written an open letter to global leaders saying that COVID-19 has shown us that overnight transformational change is possible. And their recommended solutions are renewable energy instead of fossil fuels, nature and reforestation, sustainable food systems and regenerative agriculture, and shift to a more circular, local and low carbon economy. And these positive actions can be a much needed source of collective hope and optimism for life regeneration in these uncertain times. Next slide. Basically, a lot of people are seeing this as a reset button. So I quite like this meme that I saw on Facebook with all the angels looking at us saying, have they tried turning it off and on again? Yes, they're doing it now. And there's also an interesting essay written by Charles Eisenstein, who's a really interesting speaker and writer. And he said, COVID-19 is like a rehab intervention that breaks the addictive hold of normality. To interrupt a habit is to make it visible. It is to turn it from a compulsion to a choice. So another interesting point to make about COVID-19 is just, is it changing what we value? So a friend of mine who's an artist shared this yesterday. If you think artists are useless, try to spend your quarantine without music, books, poems, movies, and paintings. Very good point. And then, of course, everybody's experiencing this in different ways, depending on where they live in the world, what their personal and professional circumstances are. For some people, it's incredibly stressful. For other people, it's some downtime, and they're quite enjoying the quiet. So, but for everyone, it is really giving us a chance to rethink what's important to us. So I suppose now what I'd quite like to do is open up questions in the chat function. Have you seen any circular economy responses to COVID-19? So I've put one in the middle here, which is, I'm a scuba diver. So when I first saw these full face snorkel masks, I thought they were ridiculous. And I'm imagining them lying in people's drawers, never being used. But now there is a big shout out for them. I've seen people asking for them in Brighton, and then the Spanish police have been asking for them so that they could be donated and then be turned into a makeshift ventilator for corona patients. So I think that's a good way of using what's probably a waste product because it's lying in the drawer, and using it for COVID. So has anybody else seen any interesting examples of circular economy responses to COVID-19?
So if you could type what you identify in the scripts there, and then we can ask you to share. So Joe, do you want to unmute and tell us what you were talking about?
Yeah, sorry. So people are making scrubs for the NHS from old duvet covers.
Wow.
And then we got Matthew. What did you have a comment about? Sorry, Matthew.
Hi there. Hi, sorry about that. No, I was just saying that it's not exactly circular economy, but with the proliferation of fairly decent 3D printers, there is a opportunity for quite a rapid response to certain parts going missing or not being available. So I thought I'd throw that in.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you.
And Lucy's shared a link for anybody who's looking at the chat box that might be interested. Joe's confirmed 3D printing with masks for health service, which I think was related to the one that Sally highlighted as well. What do we got? Emma, what were you talking about there? 3D printing as well?
Yeah, just our local tech college has been 3D printing masks, up to a couple of hundred a day now. So great response from the students.
Very impressive. And Katie, you were talking about scrubs as well?
I can't hear anyone.
No, it shows. Are you unmuting, Katie?
Sorry, Steve, I thought you were unmuting master. Yeah.
No, I'm letting you guys unmute yourselves and mute again rather than constantly have to find you in the list, okay?
Yeah, there's too many people out there.
Yeah.
Of course. Right, so yeah, so I reclaim fabric from big events, and I've got a lot of blue cotton that is actually fairly accurately the NHS scrub colours, and that's being made to use scrubs too.
Excellent.
Really cool to contribute there.
And Caroline, you wanted to share something? No? Okay. So what else have we got here? Oh,
I
hi,
have
Caroline.
something to say. Yeah.
Go ahead.
So it's just really building up, because I'm sure that both David and whoever is working in 3D printing in Italy is already happening. So they already roll out all their design, and there are companies across Italy that have already designed and adapted those masks. And they already done the feasibility assessment, they design, they're rolling the risk assessment, they have the government approval, and now is circulated in all the hospitals. So I know some of the companies, because are from the regions that have been collaborating in the past, because I'm a water sports as well, and I think it's worth it to link up the whatever initiatives supported here by the university with the university in Italy that have already done that.
Okay, that's great. So I think we probably should move on now. Sally, do you want to carry on?
Okay, yeah, thanks. Okay, so what I thought I'd do is just refer to Katie Whalen's blog. She talked about there being potentially 3 positive takeaways. Improved ability for collaboration, both face-to-face and virtual, probably mostly virtual at the moment. Strong leadership and quick action, and support for distributed rather than centralized circularity. So on the first point, yeah, collaboration is needed to create closed loops, and that's both sort of within companies, as we know, they often work in silos, and when they start looking at creating a circular economy approach, they start to have to bring people in from all different parts of the company, look at the entire supply chain, and then start looking outside their company as well. So and we're certainly seeing a demonstration of that being possible at the moment. Then we've also obviously got cross-sector collaboration, which is key if we're going to get big system change. And we're seeing that happening at the moment as well. So, for example, governments working with big companies to mobilize their factories to create ventilators and CPAP machines and tests. So we're seeing amazing grassroots collaboration. Near me, there's lots of mutual aid groups popping up all over Facebook. People have been sharing templates so that they could print them out and deliver them to people's houses, because the most poor and vulnerable people are the ones who aren't on social media and who aren't seeing all of this. So we're seeing leaders come from all parts of society at the moment. Anyone who just decides they're going to take action and is doing a good job of it is becoming a leader. So some really interesting cross-sector collaboration going on. Maybe we could also stop right now and see if anybody's got some examples about collaboration.
Right, so I think Katie's got one.
Yeah, hi. So I've been I've been leading a mutual aid group around my neighbourhood, and very naturally people were asking to borrow tools and things like that, and with, yeah, as I say, very naturally people were saying, oh yeah, because we only really need one of those within the neighbourhood. So there's like a great sort of sharing economy being evolved there, which I've just loved being part of. And we've agreed that, well, we definitely intend to take that further beyond the pandemic and into the future, stay connected as neighbourhoods and kind of keep that hyper-local sharing economy.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Thanks, Katie.
Great.
David, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just morning, everybody.
Morning, David.
Sorry about that, David. Something went wrong there.
Yeah, morning, everybody. Just from a slightly more strategic perspective, we've been doing some work with the local authorities and some of the waste management companies, because one of the impacts of COVID has been that a lot of commercial waste collections have stopped, and there's a significant amount of operatives and vehicles not being used. And so over the last 10 days, a lot of the local government community, DEFRA and private sector companies have been working together to see if they can take some of the capacity that's not being used in waste management at a commercial level and bring it into the public sector, so that we can ensure that we keep recycling and food waste collections going. That's a really big thing, and those of you who worked in waste management at local government level, that's a huge mindset shift. And I think this whole COVID-19 is enabling people to have conversations that they would never have had in the past, because there was too many embedded barriers to having those conversations. And I think that's one of the really exciting things at the moment, and collaboration from that perspective is, it's a mutual benefit to both parties.
Right, thanks, David. And Emma, do you want to share something?
Sorry, I was on the chat screen. I was just putting a link up there for a couple of people who aren't aware that, of the redistribution. You know, things happen at quite a big scale. GoChain and Warpit are both facilitating quite a lot of reuse and redistribution. So I think we've talked about local level, and David, you know, touched on a bigger level, but there is a need for structures and platforms. So there's 2 platforms there if people are looking to operate a little bit more widely. Yeah, in regions, for example.
Okay, thanks very much, Emma. That's great. Should we move on now, Sally?
Well, yeah, just something that David said reminded me as well that I heard an interesting program on Radio 4 where they were saying that what tends to happen when there's a big crisis is that we all focus on specific problems, and then when we look back we say, oh, that was due to that specific crisis, so COVID-19. But the reality is a lot of the problems that we're starting to tackle now were already existing. So the waste management problem was already a big problem, and so hopefully what this does is actually, yeah, tips it into we're looking at solutions. But what was I going to say? I've lost my track, so I'll move on. Okay. Thank you. So the next point was around strong leadership and quick action. So yeah, there's no question that we are seeing very quick action here. So governments taking quite extraordinary action, whereas when people have been talking about social and environmental problems for years, and they would all say that they couldn't take action. Suddenly they're taking very fast action on a massive scale. So the US have introduced a kind of sick leave. European governments are bringing in millions to support small businesses. There's been some, as Katie mentioned in her blog, some really nice examples of leaders doing press conferences for children about the subject. So governments are really stepping up. Obviously, there's a lot of debate about who's doing a good job, but at least they're demonstrating it is possible to move very quickly and to suddenly find magic money trees. We've also got businesses, so we've had some really nice examples. There's a blog by Mike Barry, who used to be with M&S, and one of the things he does is mentions which companies are really treating their staff well. So Timpson's and M&S are a couple of them. And obviously we've got the examples of collaboration and innovation, Dyson and people like that getting involved. And then we've got civil society, as we mentioned before, the massive grassroots organisation of all the charities. So does anybody have any examples of this that they want to share? Or any comments?
Can I add one? I've just seen something that Iris has put up, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
That actually in Belgium, a startup company has started taking reconditioned mobile phones and offering them to old people's homes so they can actually connect with family where they haven't got smartphones already. And so it's much more on the civil society side, but some really exciting opportunities. I think I'll have to consider that for Tech Take Back.
Well, I saw a link shared on the local Brighton mutual aid group about that this morning as well. They're looking for the same thing, iPads and phones to give to vulnerable people. So yeah, it's springing up everywhere.
We might have to, we're just currently going through repurposing about 20, so we might have some that we might be able to use for Tech Take Back.
Fantastic. Okay.
Right, I was just going to say, one of the things I'm aware of is that the Brighton and Hove Food Partnership has been coordinating a lot of work on redistribution of food from various sources and sorting out how to actually get it cooked and redistributed to people that are self-isolating or struggling to access food from supermarkets or are struggling because of the cost of the food, which is a huge operation. They'd actually set up a center at the Brighton Centre, but they've now had to move that because they're thinking about Brighton Centre becoming a field hospital. But they've moved very quickly and got all of the redistribution groups, Fair Share, the whole lot all together, and a lot of the distribution people like that are doing the various things to work together, which I think is really interesting, and it's all happened in about 10 days.
Wow. Thank you. Any others?
Carol Dyer had something to say, I think.
Yeah, I just read an article this morning about, it was like producers of hairsprays and things who were allowing hairdressers and other people who rely on very in-person work to sell for a commission so that they still have some form of income.
Great.
Thank you, Carol. Right, so is there anybody else want to raise anything, or should we move on?
Yeah, I just really wonder because there is a lot. Okay, it's becoming a little bit an argumentative, yes, through the media. How obviously services that, in my view, positively, are progressing very quickly to tackle the emergency. But there is a lot of argument, and it's still a very high political games, and this is happening in all the countries and among countries. So on one side, I'm really happy to see that collaboration is happening across the globe, and it's really positive message because we have to face the emergency, but it's also used on the political ground by everybody, and we are all aware about it. I just really wonder if people senior within this group are aware if there are ways of collaborate and if it is facilitated, because if it's not and it's not supported for political game, and we are talking here negotiation ahead of Brexit and the partnership with the US, I would like to know, because sometimes really working and facilitating collaboration, if there is no interest, I prefer not to. And I'm a co-circulator myself, but I'm sometimes frustrated if the political game has higher ambitions that we cannot really, even within this group and with all the circular economy clubs in Europe and the world, can really not yet have a constructive action. Yeah, sorry for a lot of talking. Yeah.
Oh, okay, thanks for that. I mean, I think that's a key challenge for everyone, but we can maybe cover that towards the end. I think you're going to have a bigger discussion, weren't you, Sally, at the end of the discussion?
Yes, to start looking at stop, start, continue. So
yeah,
and
that might be a good place to
anybody. Yeah.
consider about the whole issue of how politics is or isn't contributing, from what I could take up on that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if anybody has any comments they want to make that are relevant to that, they can also put them in the chat to bring it forward for people later. Did Lee Baker want to say something?
No, let's carry on. It was just saying really that the projects in Brighton, I love the fact that we've got the small people collaborating, like Brighton Gin have gone in with another company to produce hand sanitizers right up to the big food distribution that's going on. There's a lovely example of Hisby, food supplier, with the vegetables went off to someone else where they were going to make more money. And so Ian from the Bevy is in and produced money. And so I'm just loving the fact that there's a lot of collaboration going, and from that real small individuals right across the city and out and beyond, with the really big projects as well, like you're saying, filling up the Brighton Centre. So.
Okay, thanks for that, Lee.
Thanks, Lee. Okay, so just to move on to the third point that Katie brought up. So she was just talking about support for distributed rather than centralized circularity. So for a couple of decades now, we've been moving towards this globalized just-in-time model. And now the weaknesses are starting to show in that model. We're starting to see, obviously, shortage of supplies in various areas, and this could definitely accelerate interest in having local and regional supply chains in the future, which is obviously a key part of circular economy. So that would help us build up our local resilience and, well, help everybody build up their local resilience. There were some interesting examples. Well, let me open up the floor actually, because I can see that the chat function is going. So does anybody have any examples relating to this?
Right, so
yeah,
I'm here. I just unmuting myself there.
Okay.
Matthew, did you want to say something?
Yeah, so I think that as a whole, society has fallen into the trap of thinking that the individual is disempowered, that they do not feel as though they've had a role in the betterment of society, that they feel slightly lost and at the edge. You know, it's a bit like the recycling conundrum, you know, how you segregate waste streams, does it really matter? But what we're seeing here from the top down is actually individual behaviour matters probably more than government action, as shown by the link that I've just given. So maybe there's actually quite a supporting shift here in mindset, certainly supporting elements of the circular economy, because people are starting to realise that their individual behaviours do matter. And as a societal shift, now I think that's very powerful.
That's great, thank you.
Thanks, Matthew. Claire, did you want to say something?
Yeah, hi everybody. I've seen a massive increase in people being more interested in growing their own food. I mean, we are at the start of the growing season anyway, but when I was going to pick up some seeds to grow some lettuces a few weeks ago, there was somebody standing there and they were literally looking panicked. And they were like, I don't know how to grow food, and should I be growing food? And it was really interesting. I had a little chat with her and her daughter, and she wanted to have something for her child to do when the schools were sort of closed, so educate them. But I thought it was really interesting that people are now starting to reconnect back with the way that food is grown, understanding growing seasons, how things grow, where they grow, how long it takes for things to grow. So whilst it's sort of setting some panic in some people, I've seen a lot of people getting in contact with me through Insta when I've done like quick posts about, you know, this is where the seeds are at, you know, day 7 or something, and people really wanting to learn more about how their food is produced, and also feeling really empowered when they do grow some lettuce seeds or start to see something sprouting. So I think that's a real positive as far as skill sharing goes, but also empowerment of people to understand how their food is actually produced.
Thanks for that, Claire. Did you want to say something, David?
Yeah, I was just going to say, actually, I was intrigued by Anna's point a little bit further up the chat about the fact that we're going to have a rise in hard goods becoming soft goods, and I don't know whether Anna wants to just extrapolate a little bit more on that.
No, it's just I've been reading a lot about that in a different subject recently. So it just struck me that that's something that kind of technology being such a big disruptor in how those kind of goods that we usually had as being hard goods, and now they become something like music and books and money and things like that, and that this might have an impact on how more things like that we used to having as hard goods might become soft goods, because they can be. But who knows what they might be, what extra things might become soft goods that are currently hard goods. Yeah.
Well, okay, thanks for that, Anna. Tracy, did you want to say something about what's happening in Reading?
Yes, I'm happy to. Sorry for no video, but I'm working in my pajamas. We have a couple of quite large wholesalers of locally grown fruit and veg in the area, which obviously had the bottom fall out of their market when all the hotels and restaurants closed for coronavirus. So they very quickly pivoted and have set up online ordering systems so that households can order fresh fruit and veg for delivery, and I feel like that might possibly open up the possibility that those households will want to get that local fresh fruit and produce when this is all over too. So hopefully the supply chains will localize as a result of coronavirus.
Well, that's really helpful. I think James wanted to share something about what's going on in Wales.
Hi there. Yeah, hi. It's James Kay from Resource Efficiency Wales. Across the contracts that we look after for our members, we do build in locality as a factor to awarding those contracts. This is obviously for waste management and recycling, repair, reuse, etc. But essentially, that locality gets a weighting in our contracts, and it ties in with elements of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, which people can Google and read up a little bit more about. But we are doing that in Wales already.
That's great. Thanks, James. David, who we go? David, did you want to share your vision for the future of the high street?
It's something which actually I heard on a chat show yesterday, but essentially this shift to us all working from home, ordering online, could be the death knell for the high street as we know it, because we all know that many shops have been on the verge of collapse over the last 10 years. And I think what we might see is that with everybody realizing that we can do conversations like this online with 40 people from around the country, and that you can go and order food online, you can order your clothes online and everything, etc. We might end up with a modal shift in terms of what the high street is. I heard the chief exec of Iceland saying yesterday that they're trying to move towards an experiential service. What that means in English, I've got no idea. But I think it's going to be, again, another trigger. We might end up seeing a very different high street as a result of this COVID-19. And I think one of my challenges is how can we incorporate circular into what these next stages are, and I know we'll have a discussion about that later.
Okay, thanks, David. Should we move on again, Sally? Just keep things going.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, thank you for all of that. So, I suppose now we could get to, we had those 3 areas, but are there any broader ones that you would like to think about? So I've included just a reminder there of the donut model, circular economy, and then the 5 circular economy business models. But I mean, one thing that I'd heard about as well was that because restaurants are all closing, the B2B market in food distribution is crashing. So I heard a farmer who supplies eggs to restaurants saying he was in trouble because he was being contacted by lots of individuals who wanted to buy eggs, but he only had the massive egg boxes because he was used to delivering huge quantities of it to restaurants. So he was saying he could see a situation in the future where we're going to need to have really reusable egg boxes that people can take back to shops again. So so that was just one example. But are there any other examples that you feel you haven't managed to represent so far underneath those 3 headings?
Yes, I want to build up on that because I'm aware of all the Feeding the City initiatives that are happening. Probably the Brighton Food Partnership is doing a great job to try to align most of them, but a lot are still happening at community level, as far as I understand, or individual level. And what is happening, for example, and it's in line with the example that you just made, Sally, is that, for example, there is a food sharing club, so that at community levels, so at city levels by community levels. And I think the difficulties here is try to make sure that the people that are doing a surplus meal, they can pack and that one can be delivered, not to create problems to the people that will receive it. So, but it's all right. It's a lot facilitated. There are already charities like Olio and clearly all the people at the Brighton Food Partnership that is looking daily, if not hourly, all the recommendations that are coming from the health safety executive company with food handling in these cases, because they have to update and tell to all the volunteers, all the people handling food, to do it properly. But the idea of the food eggs package is already happening here in my community here. So what she did, she's collecting from the top of the beacon some eggs, and she's circulating among us, and she's asking us to bring our own egg box to her. And then she will clean the hands, she will put the eggs, and she will leave it at the distance, the 2 meters connection, social connection distance, not distance.
That's fantastic.
That's really good.
Will collect their own box. And this is at local level is the minimum way to, probably at the moment, is the easiest and way to mitigate the risk of contamination.
Okay, thanks for that, Stefania.
Great, thank you.
Hatish, is it? Patel wanted to say something?
I was just making the point that I think if people have a really bad experience as a result of being grounded at home and are really struggling with normal life, then there's just going to be a race to regain the life that they're mourning at the minute we come out of this. And there'll be no learning and no opportunity to kind of take things to the next level in the next stage. And that could be a hindrance. And I think with cross-sector collaborations, we could potentially bring out some strong messaging or take things out of the economy at this stage so that people aren't racing back to the normal way of life.
That's so true. Yeah,
I absolutely agree. So do we want to try and move on to a broader discussion at this point, Sally, or where do you want to go?
Yep. Okay. So, excuse me. Yeah, I'd like to potentially go into breakouts, and I think Steve can organise that. So we could look at if we're going to move from the current linear model to a circular model where we're living in a safe and just space for humanity. So this is our wish list. If we look, for example, at food, you know, this donut model probably wasn't on most people's radar screen, but suddenly a lot of these things are on our radar screens here in England, and in Wales, France, I think as well. Well, anyway, in the West. So a lot of these things that we assumed were basic and that they were just there are now in question. So this is a great opportunity for us to revisit it, look at how these priorities can move up the agenda. As Kate Rayworth says, stop using GDP as the main measure and start looking at what other measures we want. And can we build on this new awareness that everybody's got to accelerate some changes. The question is, how can we shift to a better system? So we could look at stop, start and continue in a variety of areas. And it really is up to you. So if you get into your discussion groups, you can just have a discussion about that. Maybe also you might want to be thinking about risks, because as Hitesh said, there is a risk that people will race back to normal afterwards. So what kind of things could we do about that? So
right, well, welcome back, everybody. I hope you found that experience in the breakout rooms successful. But if you could just let us know whether that worked for you or not in the chat. So it's not about what you talked about; it's just whether chat rooms or the breakout rooms was a good idea, or whether it might have been better to have just stayed in the big group like we did for the first part of the discussion. So now I'm going to ask Sally to lead the discussion by feedback from each of the groups, okay?
Yes. So I actually can't see any of the groups though, so I don't know if it might be better if you do it. But,
well, okay, there's groups 1 to 6, so let's hear from group 1 first, okay?
So that was me. So I'll share what we've done. So Sally, if you can take off your screen share, that'd be great.
Yes, okay.
So, and actually, before I do that, at some point during the call, it'd be really nice. I've got a gallery view of everybody. It'd be really nice to get a bit of a wave and see everybody on screen, because that looks really nice. So actually, as you're all there, give us all a wave for about 20 seconds. And I'll just take a quick photo. Oh, that's superb. Superb. Right. Get back to the sensible stuff. Okay. I noticed in one of the comments that not everybody had access to the questions, which is probably a little bit unhelpful, but there we are, these things that we've learned. So this is what we discussed in group 1. We were discussing jobs and added a new column, which was the risks, and I'll start with the risks. Oh, sorry, I've just gone backwards. Many of the risks we found were that there's going to be a change in working habits. The hospitality sector could be decimated by this. Carolyn works in the City of London. If big businesses move out, SMEs will lose out because they won't have the same number of people to work with. Many people might not change their behaviours and others will, so there's going to be a bit of conflict. We've seen a lot of white goods bought over the last couple of weeks, just about reliability rather than wanting to upgrade. We've still got some challenges around what can we do in terms of reuse and repair. And actually there might be a residual risk that people don't want reused goods as a result of the virus and there being a contamination angle. We do think that fly tipping is going to rise, and that one of the major risks is we're going to end up with a massive backlog of resources that will have been generated or cleared out or undertaken while we're in this lockdown, that will become lost because at the end of the lockdown everyone's just going to want to get rid of it, which will be the default of throwing it all away. What we feel is going to happen is we're going to see some of the high street sales jobs go. We're going to see less travel for work, and we're also going to see businesses that are not resilient going to the wall. We're going to see a lot more service-based jobs. Some businesses moving out of city centres, a lot more working from home, a lot more agile, a lot more repair services, and then hopefully some more logistics collection systems that will actually be prioritising resources and materials. But one of should probably be a risk as well. What we need to do is to start educating people on how to deal with resources post COVID-19. And we have got the captive audience, so maybe government should be stepping up. And we're going to see a lot more active travel, so walking, cycling, that sort of thing. And we think that community links are going to continue, which is a really good thing. But we're also going to have a continuation of people's mindsets, which is to prioritise their health and safety above anything else. That was us. Thank you to Group 1. It was a really interesting and useful chat. Thank you. Anybody want to add anything from Group, or is that?
I think we'll have to move on to chat room 2 now, if we could. Thanks very much, David.
Okay, I'll just stop.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, it's James Kay from chat room 2. We decided who would give feedback with about 45 seconds left of the meeting. So that's the first takeaway from this experience. Get your chair organised. Very briefly, we talked about garden waste and food waste opportunities at home, with particularly garden waste collections being suspended because they're a non-statutory service, a duty that councils have to do, so they've been suspended. So there's a big opportunity for us to begin home composting, whilst appreciating local authority and organisations that perhaps would naturally provide that communication in the past are really under the pump at the moment, and that's not a priority for us to do. But perhaps as the wider community, there is opportunity there. We also talked about, we had a couple of speakers in our group that had close connections with businesses at a local level and a regional level, and they shared experiences of how restaurants redistribute food. We talked about women's charities. A company in London called Oddbox was brought up, not something that I've heard of, that is distributing food parcels out. But the discussion on that fell to, we can all see this as an opportunity, but how do we do that when we're in isolation and not leaving our houses? That's a problem. And the third thing that we kind of summarise with is talking about the resilience that businesses, organisations face now in order to future-proof themselves, and perhaps those that have done it originally are best placed for the future. Perhaps those organisations that were already thinking circular and with sustainability in mind will be best placed for the future as well. You know, that was kind of us in a nutshell. We haven't provided any typed out notes that David did. I'm sorry. So that was the feedback.
Sorry, I could have shared a slide with you all for you to do that, but I didn't get organised, so we'll know that for next time.
We'll sort that out next time. But thanks for that, James. We've got a recording, so we know what you said, so we'll be able to use that to summarise with. Okay, Group 3.
I'm happy to get the ball rolling, and anyone else in the group wants to fill in, or if you, yes, all right. And we talked about many, quite a few things, but mainly about jobs and mental health. And I think we were talking about the kind of keeping the quality in education as something which would be quite crucial, and making sure that everyone's moving forward at the right type of speed. So looking at how all kids really should, try and getting access to technology, because not everyone would have that kind of, it's not a given that everyone's got their own computer at home. They might have to share a computer at home, and also get the kind of this time and space to get ahead in education. And relocating tech would be a big part of that, and see if we can kind of distribute laptops and the rest. And also, I guess, undervaluing in current kind of key working roles. And I know one of us in the group had connections with academics and also research about how we value the roles in society, like key workers, and hopefully that will be reassessed. Things like,
somebody's, make sure everybody's muted here.
Sorry?
So I'm just going to say, could everybody make sure they're muted so we don't interrupt?
Yeah, there's one person who's not muted and it's quite noisy. So.
Okay, go ahead.
And also looking at empty shops on the high streets. So there'd be a policy of if there's all this space that we can be used for opening, obviously, reuse centres and where people can share and borrow tools and the rest, which now has been quite a rise in need for, and we kind of, I think, reevaluating the need for that at the moment as well.
Okay.
If anyone else got anything else from group 3 to add to that?
There was a really nice comment that Anna came out with, which was the idea that it's one thing working in isolation, but also the need to be able to succeed and fail as a pack. And I think there's something really strong in that.
Good point. Okay, should we move on to group 4? Does nobody want to speak up for group 4?
Okay, sorry. So we were 4 people in the group, and we forgot the challenges that we had to discuss. So we focused on fashion sector, and we reflect what we think that is starting and stopping or will continue. So in terms of starting, there were 3 key major points. So Jo was saying that she was really pleased to see that a lot of conversation are starting happening among in our network around the social impact on the supply chain. So people are questioning more what before was not. So not only the social consequences of this emergency, but also the social consequences on the supply chain, which is good. The other element is that all more reading and talking, it will help to educate on circular economy. So it's an opportunity now. This is what is starting, not only around the issue of fast fashion and the sustainability impact of the sector. The other thing is that starting is the more engagement, so engagement across the supply chain, and a more engagement will only facilitate the constructing collaboration across the supply chain and will ease the implementation of a circular business model. In terms of stop, we just question, do we hope that fast fashion will stop after? And we left the question open. We hope so, we don't know. In terms of continue, okay, we were quite all agreeing that there may be the risk that once the whole problem is gone, the world will go back to what is used to, so to implement a business as usual model, but because in the past that's what happened. So when we had in 2009 the difficulties, so when the system started again, they will implement in profit first before purpose. We have a difference now that we have already 5 years of talking and implementing already in action of a circular model. So we are all positive and more hopeful that after the emergency, more circular business model will be implemented. But we hope not. That not as usual will be back.
Okay, so group 5.
Anyone from group 5?
Hang on. Is it Lucy or Iris want to speak?
Yes, I can do a quick recap. You put me nicely on the spot here. You probably won't see me because my camera's not working. Anyways, we were talking about how COVID-19 affects all of our individual lives. We also see that, for example, grandparents of parents have difficulty adapting, and also we talked about how maybe technology can help connect these people, like the elderly generation, and maybe this is an opportunity to involve them with technology in kind of a circular movement. I'm thinking about what else we talked about. If someone wants to help me out here, please. I think otherwise we didn't have the slides, so we didn't really focus on any particular topic. We just talked.
Don't worry, that was kind of the goal, was for you to just have a conversation about it.
Okay, great.
Did you want to say something, Lucy?
No, it's just, yeah, we were a bit lost, I think, and not in the best state of mind to think about it. But we did talk about the isolation of people and how important it was to communicate and get in touch with each other.
Okay, thanks for that.
Yeah.
We get room 6. So that's either Jesse or Matthew.
Hi there. Okay, right. So briefly, to try and add to what everyone else said, that there's a potential for the SMEs that have crashed post COVID-19 to be bought up by a larger business that survived it. Now, this has a potential to go either way. So it could actually be a good thing that bigger business is able to use its power and influence, but also it can end up taking control. It can remove localism. So there's kind of a bit of a precipice there, I think. Also, great ideas need protecting, either so that they can be shared and not owned, but IPR is a complicated area. It's not really accessible to most people. That's, I think, something that might come up quite often post-COVID. Jesse Subiton from Swafferby was within Group 6. There was one thing that's quite interesting about his model, is by taking out a cash component. So you're just giving a certain value to an item, but actually it's the intent of the two parties to want to swap that's most important. So you're cutting out another system, which brings us on to sort of the final bit, which is access to who has what in localism and the sharing economy, and how to value it. Always an issue within circular economy, hence the economy part. I think there's going to be quite a growth in how you have those exchange platforms working as smoothly and with the minimum amount of hurdles, because I think we'll find that post COVID is that a lot of shortcutting will take place. That, you know, someone will say, well, I knew person X, I found out about them during the lockdown, and I never knew them before. I never knew they existed before, and now I can do business with them in a different way. So how do we get to almost simulating the positive elements of COVID-19 past the lockdown period?
Fantastic.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matthew. Do you want to take over, Sally, just to round things out? We're just about on time. Yeah.
Right. Where am I? Share. Okay, so thank you all for that. Yeah, sorry it was a little bit loose, but I suppose it is our first one, and it was, the idea was get you all talking, and we can always look at some more specific subjects in future calls. So this is a tool that I have referred to in previous presentations when I've talked, maybe addressed the subject of people feeling a bit overwhelmed by climate change and the massive social and environmental problems facing us. So I thought it would be nice to revisit it in the context of COVID-19 as well. It's a tool that comes from The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is a book by Stephen Covey, and it's the circle of control. So what's happening at the moment is, if you look at the biggest circle of concern, all of our circles of concern, we're finding they're much bigger than they usually are. We're worried about this big global threat, which might actually impact all of us. So, so that can feel overwhelming. So one of the uses of this tool is to help you when you're feeling overwhelmed, because you notice where you're spending your energy, your time, and think, is it in my circle of concern, or is it actually in my circle of control? So the things that you can control, things like I've put on the bullet points: healthy eating and exercise, put your own oxygen mask on first, and then you're in a better position to help other people. How you interact with others, how you leverage your own skills and interests maybe to do something useful. And if you're spending a lot of time in your circle of concern and not in your circle of control, you're probably likely to be shouting a lot at other people and getting frustrated. And so if that works for you, carry on. But if it doesn't, then start to really notice where you're spending your time and energy and move into your circle of control. So and that sort of links back to what Matthew said earlier about feeling people have been made to sort of feel disempowered and disconnected from things. And this crisis is actually a great opportunity for us all to notice what we are, that we have more control over things, like our food supply and things like that, that we want to actually take more of an active role in all of this. So, and the more time you spend in your circle of control, the bigger it gets. That's the good news. And also, the bigger your influence on others is. So instead of just shouting at them, you're just getting on with stuff, and they notice, and you start to influence them. And that's how change happens. One lovely example, somebody was posting on Facebook about all these ornamental plants going to waste at garden centres. And Tom Daniel, who runs Old Tree Brewery, said, well, wouldn't it be a great idea if they were all used in community composting? So then somebody else has said, okay, I've contacted my garden centre and suggested they do this. Why don't they create a community composting facility in the garden centre? And we can start to grow, create better soil to be able to grow our own food in the future. So imagine if that was replicated across the whole country. So good example of someone focusing on their circle of control. So the wrap up, we're running out of time, so I won't ask for any final thoughts, but feel free to write them in the chat or to email us. We've got some suggestions for future Zoom sessions. I think there was one about supply chains in May. We'll send you an email about it. Odul Bozkurt, who's on the call, who is a lecturer at Sussex University Business School, she suggested doing one about skills and jobs in a circular economy, because she's been working with a team in Amsterdam about that. And yeah, so any other suggestions, also put them in the chat function or email us. So yeah, this was quite a complex topic, but it was good to get the conversation started. COVID-19 is actually relatively simple compared to all the other problems that we're facing, but maybe this is teaching us something that we can start to lay a path to addressing these bigger problems as well. Yeah, I think that's me wrapping up. Thank you very much for taking part. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, thanks everyone. We'll try and post a recording of this and the recording of the chat on the website so that you can find it if you want to go back and see what's happened. And we'll try and write a blog based on what was put forward. And all it leaves me to do is say thank you everybody for joining us, and thanks to Sally for her excellent presentation and leading the discussion. And we'll be back soon again, hopefully with another chat if I can figure out how to make all this work. Bye.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you all. Bye.